Hello friends, my name is Lauren and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm really excited for this video because I'm filming my first ever book review. Normally I do book talks, which I just kind of talk about the events in the book, when they happen, my opinions on them and all that, but I'm doing my first ever in-depth book review on a book, and I'm doing it to The School for Good and Evil. This is the first book in the School for Good and Evil series. The fifth book is currently on the way, coming out on March 5th, 2019. So in honor of that, I will be releasing book reviews or book talks, depending on how well prepared I am, for the rest of the books in the series, so get excited for that. And today, as you already know from the title, I am doing a book review for The School for Good and Evil. As you can tell here, I kind of have demolished the book, and I've taken many notes on this book, so I hope to have a good review for you guys today. And I'm just going to start off with a few non-spoilers and jump into what this book is about. So for those of you that don't know, this book follows our two protagonists. We have Sophie and Agatha. Basically, Sophie values doing good deeds, trying to be a good person. She likes to look beautiful, she wears dresses, all that kind of stuff. And Agatha is basically the complete opposite. She wears black, she lives alone with her mother in a graveyard, she doesn't like people in general. In their village, everyone kind of thinks she's the evil one. And so our story follows Sophie and Agatha and basically how they get taken by the schoolmaster to go to the School for Good and Evil. And basically in their town, kids at roughly the age of 12 years old, every 4 years, two of them get taken, one seemingly good and one seemingly evil. So it's no surprise to when people see that Sophie and Agatha are taken, everyone assumes that Sophie is going to the School for Good and Agatha is going to the School for Evil, but who knows what's going to happen there and how their futures might end up. If you want to check out more about what this book is, you can just look up the synopsis yourself, but I hope that explains a little bit of the general idea of this book. I really like the idea of this book and how it follows essentially like a fairy tale kind of theme. Or not even a fairy tale kind of theme. It is a fairy tale theme in this book. Basically, the idea of this book is basically people go to the School for Good and Evil to learn how to get good skills or evil skills, and eventually to hopefully be in a fairy tale of their own. So I really like the concept of this book, and the two main characters definitely seemed like interesting protagonists as I started this book. As for my overall thoughts on the story, I don't have too much to say for the non-spoilery section because I have like 7 pages of information to go through for the spoilery section, but I do want to say a few things just so you get my overall opinion. For this book, I'm rating it a 3 out of 5 stars. I was kind of on the fence between 2 stars and 3 stars, but at this current moment I think I'm leaning toward 3 stars just because I did enjoy the book as a whole. I didn't really enjoy the first half of the book as much as I did enjoy the second half of the book. So if you do read this book and you're finding the first half not as good or not good in general, if you do want to stick around to see what happens with the story, I do say that the second half is much better and maybe almost worth the read. Not entirely sure. It kind of just depends on your own opinion and what you kind of value more in a story. I did find that there were a few problematic things in the story, such as there being a overwhelming amount of use of stereotypes, and if you know me, I ain't about that, and just seeing all that so much wasn't for me, as well as one of our main characters just painting so many girls against each other, and I just, those two things just aren't my thing and just definitely turned me off from this book. But then, as I said, the second half of the book definitely progressed and it got better. I do think that the story concept is very good, and while there might be a few problematic things, I definitely think that the second half of this book was really well written. I do think that the second half of this book definitely turned that story around for me, and I don't really know how to say this without giving away too many spoilers, but I do like to say that the whole like fairy tale good and evil thing was really well done. I did like that element a whole lot, and I actually really can't wait to see how the good and evil plot carries on through the next few books as they go to read them. Something else I do want to add before I jump into my spoiler section is that the two main girls in this story, Sophia and Agatha, and as well as many of the other students, are all 12 years old, and this is a middle grade book, so that makes sense, the characters being 12 years old. However, I do feel that almost some of the themes and concepts in this book should be for slightly older than 12 years old, because I do feel some of them could be pretty toxic to the way people look at themselves and other things like that, and I don't know how to say it without giving too much away. So on that note, I do want to jump into the spoiler section. So just a quick recap, I did give this book 3 out of 5 stars. There were a few problematic things, but also a few great things with the plot specifically and the overall story idea. So I did enjoy this book, especially the second half of the book, and I would maybe recommend it if the synopsis sounds like something you would enjoy. And now on to spoilers. If you do not want to be spoiled, do not watch this part of the video because, as I said, there will be spoilers. So pause the video, leave now, read the book, come back, and then watch this part, okay? Talking about spoilers, we're starting now. Okay, hello. So if you're watching this part, you have read The School for Good and Evil. Awesome, yes, this is what we're doing. We're talking about spoilers now. So get ready. I do have quite a few notes that I want to go over, so if I'm just looking down a little bit, just ignore that. I have a couple of sections I want to talk about in this book. First off being characters, then the plot and overall story, problematic things, conflict, romance, story structure, and just my overall concluding thoughts. First off, I'm going to be talking about characters. Now there were a lot of characters in this book, but for this section, I'm going to be focusing on our two main protagonists, Sophie and Agatha, as well as two side characters being Tedros and the schoolmaster. There are more side characters, but I feel those four characters are the most relevant to the story and play the biggest roles. For the first half of the book, up until Sophie starts doing her like evil lunch speeches things, she was really flat and boring as a character for me. All she cared about was her looks, reputation, and really anything that would benefit her. She didn't seem to have any other motives other than those. It felt like the same situations were just repeating each other every single time. She just cared about how she looked, complained when she didn't look how she wanted to look, and complained when she didn't get the attention she wanted. After that halfway point through the book, I felt we saw the more like true Sophie rather than the perfect Sophie she was trying to be or trying to show everyone else. I thought we saw a little bit more of her true colors, and while they might have been a little bit more on the evil side, that's just how her personality is, especially within this fairy tale kind of world. That's just how her character is going to come out naturally. However, part of the reason I didn't really like this book is because one of our main protagonists was just so flat and like kind of vain in the beginning, and even though it just is part of herself, and it is okay to value looks and reputation, all those things, but those shouldn't be your only motivations in life. You should have other hopes and dreams, whatever they may be. They're not your only thing you want in life. And hopefully also you don't care only about yourself, you care about someone else at least a little bit. So I just felt from that regard she was just kind of bland and boring as a character and not genuinely like believable or a genuine character because of how straightforward her motives seem to be. As for Agatha, I'd say she's the only character in this book I genuinely liked and grew to like even more as the story progressed. She just was very real, I felt, throughout the book. She called out the school in all their like stereotypical ways and tried her hardest to keep herself and Sophie friends no matter what came between them, which I felt was a really admirable trait. All she wanted to do was get herself and her friend back home to where they belonged, and only to be met with Sophie's resistance and betrayal almost every chapter, even though that's what Sophie said she wanted to. I do feel Agatha was an honest representation of what good should be, because even though she wore black and she didn't have many friends and she didn't smile that much, like she worked hard, and she worked hard for what she thought was right. Her soul just genuinely followed the good rules, and she eventually became more open, honest, and beautiful than she ever thought she could be, and I overall just thought she was a really excellent character, not only just how she started, but how she developed along the way. So the evil and good rules are the evil attack, the good defend, the evil punish, the good forgive, the evil hurt, the good help, the evil take, the good give, the evil hate, the good love. And I definitely feel that Agatha followed the good levels extremely well throughout the story, never really doubting herself and never really having an opportunity to doubt herself. She did what she thought was right, just truly was a good character. No pun intended, I guess. Tedros was kind of just a big cardboard cutout. Everything he did was predictable. The only kind of backstory we get on him is that his mother cheated on his dad, and so that way he was determined to find his true love, unlike his dad. We didn't really see any progress with him as a character in general. We only saw him care about getting a girl that actually would like him for him, and other than that he didn't seem to have many motives, and so overall I think, especially in this book, he was just a bland, boring character, only enforced the stereotypes that the school had, and just wasn't really that interesting of a character that I would go talking about to others. Finally, the last one on my list that I want to talk about is the schoolmaster. I think we didn't really learn a lot about him until like the very end, where he thought Sophie was the like perfect person for his never after, and which is an idea that I'm really excited to explore in the next coming books, but I just want to see more of his character as we go along in the books, because I feel he's going to be really interesting, especially that we know he's the evil brother. I just think that whole thing is going to be really cool, and so I really can't wait to dive in more of his character because we don't know a whole lot about it in this book. Next up is the plot and overall story. I have to say that I really enjoyed the story idea. I just feel the execution of it was not that great. Like, imagine this whole other world where there's a school where you can learn good and evil traits to hopefully one day become a fairy tale storybook character and have a story of your own. Like, that just sounds so cool. You have people around the world who know your name. It's just such a cool idea, especially just the whole school aspect, and I did like how it was written in that regard. This idea just sounds so good and had so much potential, I feel, but I feel the author only really dug deep and well into it in the second half of the book. You're gonna hear me say a lot in this video that the first half just kind of sucked, and yeah, it did. There were just so many stereotypes in this book, and I absolutely hated it. As I already said, I don't like stereotypes. I think that a certain amount is understandable, especially when it comes to fairy tales. Like, obviously, we all know that there are stereotypes in typical fairy tales. That's okay, but The School for Good and Evil just had so many, and I feel it was almost to a point where it was unnecessary. Also, Agatha was the only character that seemed to notice anything bad about all the stereotypes here. Everyone else just kind of accepted it and was like, oh yeah, this is the way things are. Agatha was the only character we saw where things didn't seem to line up right for her, which is why part of the reason why I thought she was actually genuine and real, because of how blatantly horrible some of these things were. An example of this is literally the first good lesson the Evergirls are taught is how to smile kinder for their prince. This book was published in 2013, and I mean, that's only 6 years ago, and I mean, Really? Like, was that really necessary? All the Ever girls really learned in this book was how to look delicate and pretty and just imagine their prince 24/7. And the Ever boys, they just learned how to fight and lead. And of course, these things are fine for people to learn in a fairy tale thing. However, that's the only thing these people learn and the only thing they learn. Like, there should be some kind of mix and some kind of just genuine, like, hey, everyone has feelings and everyone should be able to protect themselves. Like, what is this? Also, just a typical stereotypical thing. All the boys wore blue, the girls wore pink dresses, just little stereotypical things like that. It's just like, I understand it, but like, do we really need this enforced so ingrained into this book? No. Tedros, also being the main prince in this book, as he's the son of King Arthur, he did nothing to help the stereotypes in this book. As he was trying to convince everyone that Sophie shouldn't be an evil, he said, "A girl like you shouldn't be anywhere near evil." And may I remind you, at this point in the book, he doesn't even know Sophie's name yet. He learns her name a page later. So all he is judging Sophie on, and that she should be good, is how she looks, which is beautiful. And Agatha should be evil because she isn't. And I'm just like, that's horrible messaging. Like, this book focused so much on looks and just all those like vain things, and obviously it's okay to care about your looks, like that's fine. But just the amount of times this book references that and puts value on it, I just felt was completely unnecessary and just very toxic and problematic, especially to younger audiences, which this book is aimed for. One thing also that I did not like in the story was that I did like the idea of the Ever Ball, just not the way that it happened. The Ever Ball is a way for the Evers to celebrate everything they've done, have a fun night out, but also for the marking system within that. The boys have to ask the girls, and if a girl does not get asked, she fails at school and has to suffer whatever consequence. If a boy just chooses not to ask a girl, he just gets half marks and can go anyways by himself. First off, how is that fair? It's not. It just puts more value on girls having a guy to depend on rather than the guys having a girl to depend on or anything like that. So first off, my thing with that is if a girl wanted to ask a guy, she should be able to. And also, that's just completely unfair. Like, why would anyone fail? Like, that just puts so much value on why the girls need a man to depend on. And it's, like, this book was published in 2013, but it's 2019 now. People can do what they want. This book does not enforce it. I ain't about it. I kind of still have a whole problematic section to get into, but one more thing in the story thing that I wanted to talk about, not completely problematic, just something regarding the story, was that Agatha's feeling for Tedros I feel was very forced and wasn't very true to her character. I know at the end she starts to feel more beautiful and comfortable within her own skin, but I feel for someone who just hated the idea of being in a relationship, especially with Tedros especially, I feel her feelings for him grew too fast and almost was too forced, so I do feel that that element of the story wasn't very good. I feel the romance for Agatha could have been so much stronger and pure because of how good of a character she was, but I do feel it was just kind of forced on there and could have been developed a whole lot more. Those are my ideas for the plot and overall story idea. I did like the story idea itself and the plot. I just think that some of the ways it was executed were really problematic just because of the way how many stereotypes there were. Maybe some people like that kind of thing, but not for me. I just don't like that kind of thing, especially with so many stereotypes in books, and I didn't like that since this book is aimed at a younger audience. I don't think that would be a healthy thing to read for kids that can't tell the difference between a story and real life. Even though some can, some can't, and I just don't think that's good messaging. Problematic things. Now this is kind of related to what I was just talking about, but we have a section for it now. So this book is a middle grade book with our two main protagonists being 12-year-old girls, and in the first chapter we have this happen. Sophie felt her thighs burn. Had these climbs thickened her legs, all the princesses in storybooks had the same perfect proportions. Thick thighs were as unlikely as a hooked nose or big feet. This is like horrible messaging for young girls. Like basically it's just saying that there's one way to be, and if you do any form of exercise at all, you're not going to look this way, it's just not going to be good. That's not good messaging again. Problematic? I think so. And then a few chapters later, when all the Ever girls arrive at the school for good, we get this wonderful line. They all flaunted tiny waists, slim legs, and slight shoulders. Again, even though there are people that look like that, not every single good person in the world looks like this. How is this good messaging? It's not. Basically just saying the only person in good, they all look in like this specific way, and even though Agatha isn't specifically like that, she proves to be the greatest one of them all. I feel especially, as I said, in the first half of the book, if you give up on this book less than halfway through, you're gonna be stuck with this bad messaging, and it's not good. Not only that, the students in the school and the teachers themselves also just force these stereotypical ideas almost the whole way through the book, especially the first half. Basically when everyone's trying to prove that Sophie was put in the wrong school and should be in the school for good, Agatha in the evil one, basically all they go off of is how they look. Basically Sophie's trying to smile and is in pink, and Agatha's grumpy and wears black. Like, this is the only thing they're going off of, and I just feel like this is not a good representation of what good and evil is. Just so many stereotypes. As I already said, not about it. These were most of the problematic things that I saw that I just said as I was marking through the story, and I just thought that these were some of the reasons why this book doesn't mark higher up on my list, and especially since I was debating between a 2 and 3 rating for this book, I am still sticking with 3 for the current moment because I do think that the story idea was good and that the second half really made up for the lack of everything in the first half. But definitely these problematic things are a big reason for why this book did not score higher for me. Next up, I want to talk about the conflict in this book. There are 2 main types of conflict I found. There's the fight between good and evil, and between Sophie and Agatha. I found the conflict between good and evil absolutely amazing. Absolutely 100% really good. It seemed real, believable, and just like something genuine that I think could happen as I was reading through the text. We all know fairy tales and stories, they all have a good versus evil plot, and I definitely think The School for Good and Evil captured the good elements and the evil elements, as I already said, the good rules and evil rules. I definitely feel they just captured those elements and really implemented them well throughout the story. However, I did not really enjoy the conflict between Sophie and Agatha, at least in the first half, 2/3 part of the book. Sophie was kind of a flat and boring character until, as I said, halfway 2/3 of the book, and Agatha just kept forgiving everything she was doing, and they kind of just ended up in the same spot every single time with not much long-term conflict between them. It just felt very repetitive, and until that halfway 2/3 point, I felt then, at that point, their conflict started to become more real, and especially as we found out that Agatha is Sophie's nemesis, especially at that point when we see that conflict really build near towards the 2/3 end of the book, I felt at that point that conflict was really well written, really well done, but the first bunch of the book conflict, I didn't really enjoy it that much and didn't really see the truth and long-term value of it. So just for the conflict, the School for Good and Evil, like the whole good and evil part was really well done, but then the Sophie and Agatha part I think definitely took a little bit more while to develop, but hopefully since now we have that foundation, it will just grow and progress as the books go on. Next up is the romance. Now I had trouble trying to determine what I counted as romance in this book because so much I found was like fake and forced and just not genuine. Like I think of romance as something genuine and real and just genuinely loving, but as I just said, so much of it was fake, it was hard to tell the difference at some points between what was real and not real. I also feel that the romance was created with literally next to nothing, especially between Sophie and Tedros. Essentially everything between Sophie and Tedros was fake, and the romance between Agatha and Tedros literally lasted 5 seconds until Sophie betrayed Agatha once again, surprisingly, and tried to turn their love story around, and we just kind of have this cliffhanger at the end of the book that doesn't tell us how he actually feels, and just this whole mess of stuff. The romance in this book, it was like there, it was trying to be there, it was good. I liked the idea between the Everball and the Noball, especially how the Evers have to find love and the Evils don't. I liked that whole idea, but I feel like the specific romances weren't that good. And second to last, we have the story structure. As I've already said, the first half of the book I was incredibly disappointed by. I was debating on giving this book a 2, even 1 star rating at that point just because I felt the characters were bland, the plot was repetitive, I didn't really enjoy it at that point. I absolutely hated Sophie in the way she was written. As I've already stated many times, she was bland, had the same motives, and didn't really seem that believable or that good of a character. It's obviously understandable to value looks and reputation, and even understandable to judge other people on their looks, but for that to be your sole motive and purpose in life just kind of seemed fake and not very true to how Sophie really was, as we learned from her later on in the book. Just for the first 250 pages, we don't learn that much about Sophie and how she actually is, and so I definitely feel the pacing in this book could have been a whole lot shorter in the book, cut some things out, and just skip to the more second half and even add on to that. I did like, however, the foreshadowing in the book, specifically for 2 specific parts, when we have the schoolmaster reveal and then how we find out that Agatha is Sophie's nemesis. Within the first 2 pages of the book, we find out that Sophie is dreaming about this party thrown in her honor and how there's many princes there, but one of them stands out in particular for her and how she feels she's the most happiest and just gravitates towards him the most. Who we end up finding out near the end is the schoolmaster, which kind of brings up all the questions of how much did the schoolmaster actually play from the very beginning of the story without us even knowing us. Like, his magic is really strong, we already know that. Also, we know that he's the evil brother and that he wants Sophie to be his like never after, and she seems like the perfect person. I just definitely think that it was really cool how he was planting that seed in her head from the very beginning of the book, even without us knowing. I know I didn't catch on to that. And I just thought that reveal at the end was really well done, and the foreshadowing was excellent. As well for finding out that Agatha is Sophie's nemesis, I think I picked up on the clues pretty well. I'm not sure if I got the clues right or if it's because I've read the books before, but basically I got this from when the students have their like henchmen pet things. This is a line from the book. Sophie's Cupid kept trying to attack Agatha. Lady Lesso said these exact words. You know, by looking at him, you'd think, never mind. And then the same person says on another day, some henchmen go rogue, it's a hazard of villainy, but it's usually because ... Again, she didn't finish her sentences, but I just found the way these were written with the context of the story, I felt that, hey, wait a second, if the teachers are seeing these like villainy traits with Sophie's henchmen towards Agatha, what if these traits are because Agatha is Sophie's nemesis? Like, I just connected these dots, and I think that's the foreshadowing for that. If it is, excellent job, I'm glad I caught it, but I think the foreshadowing for those two parts in particular were really well done in the story. Finally, for the ending of this book, I think the cliffhanger kind of sucked and everything was kind of rushed at the end. We don't really know what happened, and obviously I know that's the whole point of a cliffhanger, to leave the readers wanting more, but I feel like an epilogue, just for like 2-3 pages, could have just added a little bit more to the story to give a little bit more closure to the reader, because all we know is that Sophie and Agatha disappeared, Tedros says wait, and then that's all we know. We don't know anything else, we don't know what happens to the story in their fairy tale or anything else. I feel a little bit more closure, one more page, a few more, an epilogue, something would have closed this book off much better and just given the readers a more satisfying ending. Finally, my overall thoughts for this book, I did enjoy it, and as I've said countless times, the second half of the book was really good. I like how Sophie was this like really cool villain character when she was like looking beautiful as her like villainy speeches, and then also how at the end she completely transformed into a witch, how she embraced being ugly, which I kind of found off her character, but whatever. She became just such this cool villain who betrayed in an instant and just became so like so much smarter and like efficient in her ways of doing things. I just thought that progression was really cool for Sophie. So definitely the second half of this book really bumped that up, bumped the rating up for me, as I was kind of debating on the 2 or 1 level for this book, but definitely the second half was a pleasant surprise, and so curious to see if any of you have read this book, if you enjoyed the first half or second half more, or if you just kind of liked the book in general or did not like it. These are my opinions. I think the characters overall grew. I think the 2 main protagonists grew a whole lot more as the story went on, and I do think that this book had a solid foundation for the next book coming in the series. Obviously stay tuned for my next video if you want to see that. But overall, I think this book was worth the read. I'm not sure if I'll be rereading it anytime soon, but I think it might be interesting to read in like a year or something when I've had more time to think about this book, as well as revisit some of the things, and if I still think that this book is as problematic as it is. One final thing though is I do want to say that the 2 protagonists in this book are 12-year-old girls, and I feel that some of these themes that were happening to them, such as such intense romance and just these stereotypical ideas going into their heads, I think were horrible for like long-term progression, especially since the readers of these books will be roughly in that age group, more or less, even though middle grade books can be enjoyed from people of all ages, hence I am reading it now. But I do think that this target audience could be negatively impacted by some of the ideas in the first half of this book. But overall, I would rate it a 3 out of 5 stars, overall a good book, and yeah, that's essentially it for my first book review. I hope it was well. I tried to dive in as deep as I could and explain my ideas well enough, so if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and comment down below, as I already said, if you read this book, if you liked it, if you didn't, if you liked the first half, second half, or if you agree or disagree with anything that I'm saying. Essentially just anything about this book. Let me know your thoughts. I'm genuinely interested in how you felt, because overall I was kind of meh about this book halfway through, and then it just got better for me, as I've already stated before. Anyways, until next time, I will see you very soon with a new video, and until then, bye.